Hey everybody, this is Kyle Sharp here. I'm the guy that created Batty Zabella, and also technically kind of am the entirety of the Ice Cold Blood quote unquote studio. For now anyway. But yeah, Batty Zabella has just been something of a passion project of mine for, well, since quite a while actually. Probably started working on it. Well, easier to say I finished the first game in 2022 for October 31st, but I had actually been trying to come up with ideas for the project like at least 2 years before that. I didn't even know that I was going to make it a Game Boy game originally. But that's what it ended up being. So anyway, not to get into the whole history here, just saying. Also, I'm not usually as narcissistic as this is to have a wallpaper of my own game project. However, I thought, just for the brand for this video, we'll put it up there. But anyway, the purpose of this video, I just wanted to show some people that were interested to know how I did my process for the pixel art of Batty Zabella 2. So, Batty Zabella 2, the demo version at least, is actually out now. And you can find it right on the official webpage, battyzabella.com. I had a little fancy timer counting down to it here. But now it's out, and you can either click the image or the actual little itch icon. I'm sure some of this will change. The original game has also been up here for a long time to play. Both are on itch.io. So if you go there, here's the demo. It's all up now, and yeah, it's been quite a lot of work. The first game was also a lot of work, but if you look at even the screenshots here on itch.io, you can see that, well, the cutscenes were still pretty okay. Like, I don't think it was a poor job, but basically I didn't really have any process for these backdrops. I pretty much just drew them freehand. Like this cave picture you can see here, this was all kind of just pulled out of my ass basically. Same with the forest. Still kind of happy with how it turned out, but the backdrops, especially in the house, the perspective was pretty wonky. I didn't really do anything special for those, I guess is my point. So, but for the second game, all of this stuff was kind of planned much more effectively. I guess we can just maybe run it real quick here. See how that goes. The original game was played with a cursor, which I guess I could demonstrate as well, but this one here, I wanted to actually get like 360, essentially 360 turning for her, so that there was no need for like controlling a cursor or a crosshair with the arrow keys. Since this is all built to be on Game Boy, I couldn't really add mouse support, at least not easily, to the first game. And even if I could, I think this is a better solution. So basically, she can look around, she can press down to examine things, and likewise, she can press up in some situations when the up arrow is a question mark, and she can make a comment on something specific in the scene. And yeah, she leaves, and we got more hallways here. And then we even had this cutscene here, which also I kind of had a perspective guide for. So anyway, all this is to say, it's been a lot of work, and I'm going to show you the process here shortly. But yeah, so like the hallway down here, there's a map. This is showing an accurate layout of the actual house, which, pinpoints exactly where she is at any time. Even her direction will update on the map based on where she is. This little flashing icon is based on her hairpin from the first game. So yeah, you can pretty much just explore the whole house, all the angles, no real wonky perspective. So yeah, anyway, a lot of people were curious how exactly I achieved that. So here's how that is. I basically built the entire house in 3D. So here's that. I don't blame anybody if they're not super familiar with what this software is, because it's actually quite antiquated, we'll say now. It is Autodesk Softimage, also known as XSI. It's a bit of an older one, but, well, at least this particular version is a freeware version that was released as basically what's called Softimage Mod Tool. And it was released essentially to be a modding software for games like Crysis and Half-Life. So it was released as freeware. Typically you would have to get the license for Softimage, but this one can still be found online and it still works. And if anybody has knowledge of 3D softwares, they might wonder why the hell I'm using this and not like Maya or Blender. And the short story is, this is the software I learned in college for modeling, and I still like it. So there you go. I do use Maya in a professional capacity for a television studio that I work at, but this is still my baby. So for weird little personal projects like this, I just prefer to use this. And I even use it for a short film that I made in 2019 called Astray. Anyway, that's not really here nor there. The important thing is the fact that I just made an entire 3D set, which I've been basing my pixel art off of. So I did build all this myself, which is not super impressive because it is quite primitive. But that was the idea. I didn't really want to add much detail in here. You might be able to see what's going on better if I remove all these cameras. And let's just hide the yard for now. Yeah. So, for anybody that actually played the first game, this is a pretty mostly accurate recreation of the house in the first Batty Zabella. Like I said, I didn't build the house like this for the first game. I pretty much just invented the house. Well, I mean, I drew a map of the floor plan of the house originally before I made the backgrounds. I had mapped out most of the areas that way in the first game before actually drawing backgrounds, but there was no 3D reference, we'll say. But this time I just, slapped a bunch of crap together with cubes and whatever. I mean, some of it's a little bit more elaborate than that. I have an unnecessarily detailed chair here, but this is only because I had made this for previous projects, and I just dragged it in here, just for the hell of it. Because I have made a lot of non-Game Boy projects over the years, and some of them 3D, so I built some stuff that got reused here. I did build this chandelier here because it was going to be a little bit complex to actually draw in pixel form anyway. So it is, some of the stuff I did build just for this because it was going to be a pain in the ass to actually draw. I still drew over it, but I'll show you how that worked here now. But yeah, it helps a lot for sure. I mean, this is the TV. Like, I completely drew over this and added details. And the VCR. And the trees are pretty hilariously primitive at this stage as well. But yeah, as you can see, if you turn the cameras on, they're just all over the place. I mean, these are all the individual shots that I had made for the game. And I'm still working on some of them now, because the game has not been finished, just the demo has been made. There's the whole basement down here, which we won't even discuss right now, but here was the whole second level too, by the way. Yeah. So yeah, here's my whole folder for, well, I have it dubbed Batty Zabella Xmas. But I knew for a long time I wanted to make a Christmas themed Batty game. It was actually the very first thing I tried to do after making the original game. I'll show you a quick little preview of what I mean by that. I mean, some of this stuff is dated later, so I copied it over, but yeah, so there's even, you can see these Piscal files I had exported at 2022, so 2 years ago. But basically, at that point, I was considering just making Batty Zabella Christmas as like a side game, and basically a reskin of the original backgrounds. As you can see here, this was the living room in the first game, and I just had a couple of mock-ups for how I might want her portrait to show up there. I mean, this portrait was based directly off of some pixel art I made of her just for the Christmas following the October that I released the original game. So this was not supposed to be final. I mean, these were absolutely not final. It was just ideas I had for how her portrait might display. So it was much more on the side like the original game, but that's changed quite a bit since that. I decided to make that into a much fuller sequel. That's what we're seeing now. So anyway, within my working folder, I have a folder called Batty Xmas. Again, a little bit redundant, but anyway. This is basically a soft homage project folder. And I have my render pictures here. This is where I'm basically sending all my captures of my cameras. So you can see all kinds of stuff here. Basically, I mean, we got cutscenes here. And the first floor, second floor, B1. Yard, garage, yard front. And I have maps. And these are actually used. I mean, this is pretty easy. I took the whole overhead view of the house with all the furniture and everything hidden. And I just dragged this into Piscal. That's this right here. This is what I use, Piscal. It's a free pixel art program. It's got some limitations, but it's got layers and palettes. That's really all I need. So yeah, I just bring this in, fit it to the map screen for the Game Boy, which is a very tiny resolution, as anybody who's worked with Game Boy would know. 160 by 144 pixels. So yeah, but this is easy. I mean, I just would outline this with white lines, and there you go, on a separate layer. So we got like a ton of backgrounds here. This is my working folders. And I mean, you can see like the foyer here before I pixelized it, we'll say. And there's a ton of things here. And you can see even for these hallway corners, I tried to these were just raw captures with like a snipping tool, which I usually always have down here, but it's not there right now. But anyway, and I would just save that file, but then I did like a little preview render in Softimage, so I could actually get the reflection. And this freeware version of Softimage, it does have watermarks in renders, and even in the software itself, you can sort of see how it says Softimage mod tool watermarked across the screen. That doesn't matter to me because I'm not using the actual output of the software. I'm just using these as perspective guides, like I said. So I will show you kind of how that process went. So back to my main project folder here. I have a whole backup folder of builds, which anybody working with GB Studio I would recommend to do. Because you never know when you might need to, I mean, this goes for any project, but especially with game development and all that stuff, sometimes you might mess something up in a build and have to revert back. What I do for that is just I have my main GB Studio project is getting saved in my documents. So I just copied the whole folder into here, really. So the demo final, for example, this is the entire GB Studio working project folder. So you go into that, it's got everything. It's got assets, everything you've put into it. So, you know, you got your backdrops all backed up, all your sprites, everything. And it's got the project folder here. So if you were to open this in GB Studio, you would just get it at the state that it was at when you backed up the folder. I mean, that I don't have to really explain that to anybody, but there it is. So yeah. But in the backup, this has been, I didn't do this quite as religiously in the first game, which I kind of regret now, but I still have most of the stuff backed up in some form, but I'm going like really, really carefully backing everything up this time. And so this is February 25th, quite a while ago in terms of development for this game anyway. This was the first time I actually had the whole house laid out, so it looked pretty, well, not different, but I mean, yes, different, but basically I'll show you, like, I had this planned out pretty good, I think. So I have an emulator folder here. This is where I pop it into BGB to test stuff if I need to. So I just have this Batty Proto. This was just this one, February 25th. I just copied it over and renamed it. So drag that in, and we have an actual super, way older build of Batty 2. And yeah, there's a couple things here. I'm not going to show you a scenario test because that's going to reveal some things I don't want people to see yet. But navigation test is, yeah. So look at this. This is basically my backdrops very early on. This is back when this is pretty much all Batty would say anywhere. Hey, hon, this is the dialogue test. And as you can see, her sprite was quite different here as well. But anyway. So yeah, at this point she could just go around the house. Some very different looking things here. But at the end of the day, these backdrops do reflect exactly how the perspective looks in the backdrops of the final demo. And likely the final game. Some stuff is probably a little bit different here, but for the most part, this is... I just basically drew all these very primitively in Piskel, and just got everything kind of set up in GB Studio. And that might not be relevant whatsoever to people that are just interested in the backdrop process. But, I mean, just for the, sake of telling the whole story, I would just get everything roughed in and then do the details later, because I think, especially if you're like a one-man team or even like two or three person team, you can't really get too caught up in the details at any stage of your project. You sort of need to just like make things function and build on that over time. Alright, so this is one of my old Piskel files. Basically at the same stage that the demo I just showcased was at. So you can see everything was at a very early state. But this is part of the kitchen and the living room. And quick side note, I was going to originally have these little holly decorations in the corner, but I scrapped that ultimately for a variety of reasons. Yeah, but it is actually seen in the splash screens for the hours in the demo, if anybody cares to pick up on that. But yeah, it's not there anymore, but that's besides the point. So yeah, I'll just show you kind of how I was doing this. Basically, I would bring in the background and I would just draw on top of it to get the layout of the room. So what that would look like if I was to redo it, basically in Piskel. This is not really relevant to any particular software. I'm just saying this is how you do it in Piskel. I mean, the concept of bringing an image in for reference is the same, whatever you're doing. This would have been the very first capture I took of the living room. And I kind of saved like various versions of it, where I had the TV and the tree added. Then I had the well, the chandelier added, but I don't believe you can really see it anyway behind the border that ultimately gets put on. It wasn't even just only about the perspective, it was about the fact that she could turn 4 angles in basically every spot of the house. So I want her to be able to look this way, and then turn this way, then turn this way, and so on and so forth. So 4 angles. Like I say, basically 360-degree turning in every location of the house. And so I just wanted things to line up properly. But anyway, so I would, yeah, for this, I basically want to keep everything at Game Boy scale. So, but there's a couple of things with this particular project that I wanted to keep in mind. So, yeah, the resolution for Game Boy is 140 or 160 by 140. But basically, yeah, so I could bring it in at 160, but because I was ultimately going to add a border, I was pretty much capturing these to be able to like fit most of everything I needed to fit within that border. Some of these do get cropped though, and I'll show you what I mean. Or they all do. But so yeah, I'm importing this image. I'm resizing it to 140 by 120 or 121, whatever it ends up being. It's not super important for that 1 pixel difference or 2 even. So import a single image, 140. Combine with your sprite, anchor in the middle. So yeah, see 140. It's going to be imported into a 160 by 144 canvas. And yeah, I don't really use the animation frame function of Piskel. So I just do existing frames. And that wouldn't be really all that helpful in this case anyway, even if you did use it. But yeah, existing frames, it just means, so you see it's just frames over here. You can add a new one if you want. Typically I just work with just 1 frame with all my layers here. So yeah, this is how this is looking when it comes in. As you can see, it's not filling the whole canvas size, but that's fine, because as I said, I'm just going to hide these. So this is my border. Let's just hide the backdrop and everything. This is the border that I made for Batty 2. Whoops. Basically, it's a little bit more stylized, we'll say, from the original game, which was like a full square, just with a 16 by 16 border of black. The reason I do this is because the Game Boy backdrops can only really have so much detail. It's limited to like 192 8x8 unique 8x8 tiles, which you know, is not terrible, but it is a bit limiting. Like, if I wanted to make an entirely detailed backdrop to fill this whole thing, I mean, that'd be a little bit hard to do. But yeah, so my solution to that was to come up with a black border. And like I say, I did this in the original game as well, even though it might not look like some of those backdrops needed to have reduced detail. But there were a few that were really pushing the limit if I tried to have it as a full frame. And regardless, I wanted some sort of border to house Batty's portrait. So this time I came up with something pretty different, but I'll get into that a little bit more after this. For now, I'm just going to focus. So basically, yeah, this is how my backdrop will come in, right? And I know immediately that some of it's going to be cropped by the border, like quite a bit of it actually. You might even say it's close to like 50% of this image. Probably not quite that much, but a lot, especially with the angles here. So I would do this, and I think this background, yeah, so I definitely had it higher in the frame. Anyway, what I would do is reduce the opacity on this, make a new layer above it, and you know, I have my black color here, and really I'm just, yeah, this is exactly what I would do. I got the line tool going, and I'm just following the following the capture that I made, you know, a little loosely, because I already made this, I'm not going to do it again. But, yeah, well, I am kind of doing it again, but it only takes like 2 seconds to set this up. And I mean, I usually just hide the border, and you may not even have a border, depending on what you're doing, but like, this was my process. So for example, yada yada, blah blah blah. I'm just going to ignore the stairs for now. Well, we can pretend we care about the ceiling out there. So anyway, if we just hide this now, boom, there you go. Well, okay. Fine. We're just going to put a rough version of those there, whatever. So now if you hide that, so this is basically the idea. Boop. And that's the idea. Let's say, whatever, I don't care about the... Typically I make the ceilings black. And that also kind of helps with the detail limits as well. But let's just say, you know, brighter wall there, darker, dark rug. Make it a sort of shadowy out there. And there you go, pretty much as quickly as I would set up those backdrops for the early builds of the game. And I would get them all to this stage and do the details later. So obviously there's a huge difference between this and my final backdrops, but still, like the basic, just mapping out the perspective, it's pretty quick, pretty easy if you are, you know, versed in 3D. But basically, making primitive stuff like this is not that hard to learn, and you can get some free software like Blender or whatever. I would not advise people learning a completely discontinued software like Softimage, because this was discontinued in 2015. I'm just using it out of stubborn habit at this point, so I would recommend people using something like Maya or Blender if they want to kind of make a guide for their pixel art perspectives. But Blender is totally free, so it's a good one. And not too complicated to learn. There's tons of tutorials out there. So a little time skip here, but so this is essentially what that background ended up looking like. And this is based on when I had drawn in the TV and the tree. Obviously the tree and the TV look quite different from what was set up in here. You know, clearly you can see that I went in and actually updated a couple of visual elements. So yeah, but the TV I totally added the details here. The string lights removed from the tree, I drew those in, just kind of, you know, of my own ability. There's even some things I added that didn't exist in the set originally. Well, that picture was on the wall. If you look, it's just the lighting is a little bit hard to pick it out here. But yeah, some stuff I just added after the fact, like the circle picture here. And you know, because this Game Boy screen is so small, like I do take some liberties between the angles. Like there are picture frames visible above the staircase here, but they're not really critical to see here, and I'm really shading that area out there anyway. So I just omitted those details. Yeah, so this is how it ultimately looked. There's a couple of versions of this backdrop. There's one where the tree is actually finished. Yeah, so there's a complete version of the tree. That doesn't show up in the demo, but that will be in the final game. So yeah, the yard shots turned out particularly nice. As you can see in here, but these are really the earlier versions. I had still kind of taken the time to draw the trees in over what was there originally. Obviously you can see all this snow was added after the fact, just to make the highway look like, well, snow covered, and as if there's been cars driving over it. and I had to cover the trees in snow ultimately. But the original look of some of those angles, this is what I had originally modeled. So you can definitely see the correlation to the end result. Even these little stones here I had kind of planned to be an obstacle for a car crash. So those do exist in the final background image. But yeah, the yard is still in progress for certain parts of the game, but it was basically just a giant plain that I kind of created, you know, raised mounds on and stuff like that. And these are all pretty much the exact same object, just duplicated around and rescaled to create, you know, hills and whatnot. So yeah. Yeah, it's been quite the process for this game, building all this stuff. Ignore the floating fan, that's just, you know, don't worry about that. But, yeah, this has pretty much been my whole process for the game so far, and still will be my process for the rest of the game. And if we, you can even see that I had the fence sort of, I made a texture for the fence so that I could easily draw in the individual fence posts, which you don't really see so much in this background, but well, like, here you go, there's the shot of the house, and comparatively we can see how that looked here. 5, yeah, so there you go. It was a, you know, not a quick process to build all this stuff, but in the end, it definitely paid off. It made the process of painting the pixel backgrounds a hell of a lot less painful, and I still did add in a lot of details by hand. Ultimately, I pretty much was able to achieve exactly what I wanted with this workflow, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Obviously, we can see in the final game that Batty does take up a decent portion of the screen down here. So she actually ultimately blocks some of the details, which actually is part of the reason that I didn't really draw in certain things in this exact... I mean, like, the backgrounds are complete, but when I started trying to detail something in this particular area, I would quickly realize that it's not really going to be visible anyway, so I would leave it just black or a solid color. So yeah, ultimately that's a big deal for when you're trying to deal with 192 unique 8x8 tiles as your limit. So yeah, back to the actual game here that's up on itch. You can see what I mean. I mean, this is what I was trying to achieve, and I had to take all this into consideration. I even kind of put more of a fisheye lens on the cameras in Softimage, because I knew I was going to have to fit a lot into a tiny, tiny frame. But yeah, Batty basically covers up a large portion of the backgrounds, as I was mentioning, like that house backdrop here. But yeah, for this one, I was just essentially trying to achieve a more intimate connection to the player, I guess I would say. Like how she was on the left side of the screen before, this time she can pop up and speak directly to the player, which I think is kind of cool. And yeah, it's been a lot of work, but hopefully it's paid off, and hopefully everybody enjoys the rejigged navigation system for this game. And yeah, that's been my process. So, until next time.